Welcome to Life in LA, a look at people and places in Lower Arkansas, our LA. Lower Arkansas is made up of the 15 southernmost counties in the state. Join us each week as we talk to some of the people who make this part of the world such an interesting place to live. And now, let's join Life in LA with our host, Steve Ford.
There have been people living in Lower Arkansas much longer than it was actually called Lower Arkansas, and recently I was privileged to attend a talk at the Columbia County Library given by Carl Drexler, who is my guest on today's version of Life in LA. Carl, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Tell me, you have an official position out here. You are
I am the Arkansas Archaeological Survey's research station archaeologist here at SAU.
All right. You've been in Magnolia now for?
Since 2011, living here. Been coming here to do research since 2007.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well over a decade then. And you have family here.
Yeah, my wife teaches in the biology department at SAU, and we have a son in kindergarten.
And he's got a ball game coming up this afternoon.
Yeah, he does.
All right. Are you the coach for the team? Or
no, they're smart enough to not have me do that, but I'm a very enthusiastic supporter.
You know, I told you earlier, I ran into a lady at lunch, and she said her 8-year-old is tied between whether he wants to be a mathematician or a pro ball player or an archaeologist. So maybe there's a connection between archaeology and baseball.
Well, we all like statistics and like our history.
Math does come in handy in archaeology?
It does. And an appreciation for the past does as well. And baseball is really good with those traditions.
Oh, it is. It is. They do have their traditions. Where did you do your graduate and postgraduate work?
Well, I did my master's at the University of Nebraska. A specialization in doing battlefield research, and there was one of the faculty there had done the work at the Little Bighorn battlefield in Montana. That got me interested in doing a lot of that, and then completed my doctorate at the College of William and Mary in Virginia.
Oh, wow. Wow. There are a few battlefields near at hand, Poison Springs and some others. Where are some of the ones you've worked at?
So here in Arkansas, I've done a whole bunch of work up at Pea Ridge National Military Park, closer to here, Elkins Ferry, Prairie du Chien, a little bit of Poison Springs, Jenkins Ferry, and actually my dissertation work was on a site that wasn't a battlefield, but did have fortifications on it. It was a place over in the Red River called Dooley's Ferry. Oh, that was one of the few crossings of the Red River used during the Civil War. And it was a great opportunity to look at the sort of intersection between military and civilian life here during the conflict.
You also worked for the U.S. Army as an archaeologist.
Worked for the U.S. Army, worked for the National Park Service.
Were you enlisted in the Army, or were you an employee of the Army?
I was what they call a Department of the Army civilian. So it was certainly a non-uniform position, though. Day one orientation involved the unit commander coming up on stage and telling everyone that the contracts we had just signed were word-for-word copies of the commission for a captain in the U.S. Regular Army. That was a very different introduction to a job than I had ever had before.
You kind of backed into that one?
Yeah, it wasn't. I mean, I signed up for it because the U.S. military is a big landholder. With all the bases and the ranges, and I thought it was going to be a fairly standard archaeological job, and it turned out not to be.
You wouldn't be the first person that had been fooled by the U.S. Army about your...
As I was told, the Army cares what you can do, not what you think you do.
Reading on the SAU website, it said you have field experience in 8 states and 3 foreign countries. Wow, what were the foreign countries?
Mexico, the British Virgin Islands, and Cuba.
Cuba.
Yeah, my first dissertation project was going to be the archaeology of San Juan Hill, from the Spanish-Cuban American War. And gone down and done some preparatory work, met with a bunch of local archaeologists, got them on board, and 18 hours before I was going to get on a plane to go down and do the actual dissertation field work, we got a call saying that Havana decided that it wasn't going to happen. And that's partly how I wound up here. One of my best friends and mentors, Dr. Jamie Brandon, who was the station archaeologist here at the time, called me up and said, "Hey, I'm sorry about what happened, but if you need a new dissertation project, come hang out and we'll find you something."
Find you something else to study on then. Yeah. I think you told me you were born in 1979.
Yep.
And I made note that the year 1981 is really a crucial point for archaeologists because of Dr. Henry Walton Jones, also known as Indiana Jones. That's the year the first movie came out, but that's not what turned you towards archaeology.
Yeah, I actually didn't see those movies until much later in life. I was very interested in history as a kid, and also very interested in the history of the lives of everyday people. And I started off in college actually as a history major, and the department at Grinnell College, my undergraduate institution, very much focused on doing sort of macro level politics and international relations sort of history. And that wasn't that interesting to me. But anthropology and archaeology are really good at accessing the lives of everybody through the things that they left behind. And a lot of those people don't wind up in the historical record, but they wind up in the archaeological record.
So you're saying archaeology is more interesting than macro level politics?
To me. I mean, not everybody.
I think it would be to me too. Maybe to most of our listeners.
Well, I think it's something that everyone can relate to because we're looking at the houses people built, the food that they ate, the things that they made and surrounded themselves with. Not everybody's going to be a president, but everyone has to get food on the table somehow.
Oh yeah, yeah. So do you wear a fedora when you're in the field? Carry a bullwhip?
I don't have the bullwhip. I do technically have a fedora. I have a very large head, and it was the only hat I could find that was big enough. I also have a very nice straw cowboy hat that is great for the summer months.
That comes in handy in the Arkansas sun.
Yeah, well, that's my I had a good friend in Houston who owns the company that makes them, and it was a wedding present. So wear it with great pride.
The movie would have been nothing if it had been called Dr. Henry Walton Jones and the Temple of Doom, but he has that nickname, Indiana. Do you have a nickname you go by?
So, I mentioned I had an interest in battlefield studies, and actually when I worked for the National Park Service, my interest in particularly artillery ammunition earned me the nickname Cannonball.
Cannonball Drexler.
Yeah.
Hey, that's got a good ring to it.
It's got a good role. Yeah.
It comes right off to the students. You probably don't.
I don't mention that one to the students much. And students here are, very polite, and it's hard to shake them calling me, just simply Dr. Drexler, which my wife tells me sounds a lot like a supervillain's name.
Dr. Drexler, I presume.
Yeah, exactly, right.
The Magnolia Station here opened in 1968 by Dr. Frank Schambach. Did you ever have opportunity to know or work with Dr. Schambach? I worked for him one semester. Yeah. I'm not going to mention it, but
so I got to meet Frank here once. He came back. So when he retired, he moved back to New York, where he was from, and he came back to visit and do a little extra research. So I got to chat with him there. I talked with him on the phone several times before he passed a couple of years ago. But one of the things Frank was really, really good at was leaving a lot of notes and correspondence behind. And so I interact with his thoughts and his reactions and his words on an almost daily basis. So
that ought to be an encouragement for all of us to write down more of our thoughts.
Yeah. You lose it if you don't write it down.
Yeah.
And so much of what we do, and so much of what Frank worked extremely hard to salvage archaeological sites that were getting disturbed, and to simply get information recorded before it went away. And he did a really good job with that. And we know as much as we do about the history of Southwest Arkansas because he spent 38 years working insanely long hours trying to keep track of everything.
Someone said the shortest pencil is better than the longest memory.
Oh yeah,
and that's
well, when I worked for the Army, they were fond of saying like it never exists until it exists on paper.
Mm-hmm.
And
it may be a dream, but until it's written down.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, you recently gave that talk at the county library that I found fascinating, and I had taken a few notes. I wanted to go over some of them with you just to make sure I had them down right, because you talked about when the first people came into Arkansas, particularly South Arkansas, and I was fascinated to learn that there were these different eras. You mentioned the Paleo-Indian era from 11,500 to 8,500 BCE. That was a long time ago.
A very long time ago.
What brought those people into Arkansas?
A lot of times they're moving in, chasing herds of what we call megafauna, and a lot of classically that's mammoths and mastodons.
Mm-hmm.
Mastodons were North American pachyderms. Mammoths were ones they had come across from Asia, and we know that there were that those animals were in this area. They've I believe back in around 1984, they excavated a skeleton of one in downtown Texarkana, and then we find artifacts from that period all over the state. And my colleague up at Arkansas State University, Dr. Julie Morrow, is a specialist in the Paleo-Indian period, and she's very keen to know, anytime we get hear of a spear point that dates to that period, where it's from. She does a lot of work.
Where did those people come from following the mammoths and mastodons?
Based on archaeological evidence, and there's been some DNA work to support this as well. It looks like their folks are coming out of Asia, following animal herds and moving into this area at least 12,000, over 12,000 years ago. We keep finding, one of the great things about archaeology is you get more information and you can revisit your understandings. Since we've gotten some sites that people are still figuring out that they have whether the information is exactly right, but it looks like that they could even be older.
Wow,
closer to maybe 20,000 years. It's a great thing about science, is just you get more data and you can reevaluate.
Do more with it.
Yep.
That's fascinating, because folks in South Arkansas, lots of them like to hunt, and I guess that's what brought the first people here hunting.
Yep.
It's a shame there are no longer any, what did you call them, megafauna?
Megafauna,
yeah. No longer any mastodons or mammoths to hunt.
Well, it's important to remember that along with the mastodons and the mammoths, you also had it's called like the short-faced bear in North America, which is larger than a polar bear. Probably not something you want to face
by yourself, unarmed.
Right. Well, an angry mammoth is not going to be an easy animal to bring down, and so there was a lot of animals to hunt, but they tended to be big and mean, and so
they weren't involved in agriculture at all. More or less.
That doesn't come around for literally thousands of years after that. People are living mostly by what we call hunting and gathering, where they hunt for meat and gather wild plants. And actually, probably should call it gathering and hunting, because on a day-to-day basis, more of your calories are probably coming from gathered foods than from the hunted ones. And it's a lot of the gathering is done by women, so really it's women's work provides more of the food than the men. But the men get a lot of prestige because the plants generally aren't trying to fight back.
Oh, yeah. There weren't many people in Arkansas during that time. Maybe a couple hundred, I think I heard you say.
Probably only a couple hundred at any one given time.
Yeah.
For several thousand years. So it's partly why it's so hard to find artifacts from that period is there's just markedly fewer people.
Mm-hmm.
But then you also have to find landforms that haven't been heavily eroded in that period, and the Earth is always reshaping itself. So it's
The next period that I jotted down, the Archaic period, was from 8500 BC to 600 AD, or we call it CE now. It changed somewhat. They're no longer the mastodons or uh, the bear you mentioned, or woolly mammoths. The climate was warming up. So what was going on with people in that time frame?
people are still largely doing hunting and gathering, and that's 8500 BC to 600 BC. So
Oh,
this
it's
is
still BC.
Yeah,
Yeah,
still
I'm
BC.
sorry.
No, it's fine.
Okay.
But so the mammoths and the mastodons, the megafauna, are gone. In part, that's climate change, and also human hunting may have had a hand in it. We argue at archaeological conferences about that all the time still. But people are still moving around. They're hunting now deer and smaller animals. And during this period, and it's a very long time. We're talking about almost 8,000 years here. This is most of human history here in what is now Lower Arkansas.
Mm-hmm.
People are moving around, hunting and gathering things, but they tend to be doing this within now defined sort of homelands or ranges. Is when people were following the mammoths, they tended to go all over the place, just simply following the herds. Well, now there are more people, and people start to sort of divide into different groups, and those groups have territories.
Mm-hmm.
And so rather than just go anywhere to find your food, you may have parts of the landscape that have, say, plants that come into a period of ripeness at a certain time of the year, and so you have a camp that you go to when those foods are ripe, or you have a fall hunting camp. You have what we call a seasonal round, where people sort of go back to certain parts of the landscape.
Follow the nuts and berries and things.
Yeah, we have. It's during the Archaic period that we start to see, campsites that we have excavated, which we don't have for the Paleo-Indian period because they're so hard to find.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. What kind of artifacts do you find in that time period?
Mostly stone, spear and dart points.
Mm-hmm.
They're not making pottery at this point. When you get to the late Archaic period, you start to see people make ornaments and even some bowls out of basically like a soapstone. It's a very workable, carvable stone.
Right.
We have start to get little beads in the shape of things like locusts or birds are starting to show up late. People are still moving around a lot, so
The next
you
time
can
period.
only carry so much.
The next time. Oh yeah. They didn't have carts and wagons and things.
Right.
Yeah. The woodland Fush Malin period from
Mhm.
650 BC to
980.
900 AD. So what was different about that time period?
So that time period is different in that it's during that period when people start practicing what we call horticulture, which is sort of just a fancy word for gardening.
Mm-hmm.
So rather than move around the landscape and pick wild foods, people start domesticating plants and creating garden patches and growing their own. And so this allows you to have larger populations. You have a more stable food source, but also means that you move around less, and so we have more stable village sites that start to appear. And when people move around less, technologies like pottery become more practical. If you're moving around a lot, you don't want to have pottery; it's heavy and it breaks.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a bad idea in that context. But if you have a fairly settled, stable village, you can have that. We start seeing the first pots look a little bit like a flower pot. They're relatively undecorated.
More functional than
More functional, and also the developing that technology it's a lot of trial and error, and so it takes a while for people to just improve the art.
Mm-hmm.
And the pots are beautiful pieces of a mix of science and artistic innovation. And because it's way more complex than simply like taking some clay and shaping it. You have to prepare the clay, you have to work it, you have to figure out what to add to it to make it strong. There's a lot of things that people had to figure out to really make that a workable technology.
The next time period, the Caddo-Mississippian period, that's getting us closer to the modern era. The Caddo Indians that we hear referred to often around here. Who and what were the Caddo Indians?
The Caddos are because they're still very much with us. Their headquarters is over in Binger, Oklahoma, and we work with them a lot as archaeologists working on their ancestral sites. Mm-hmm. It's important to note that the drawing a difference between the Caddo and the Fushmaline is something archaeologists do because they change the culture, and the culture that comes around 900. We see that carry through to more recent period. It's the same families, it's the same sort of bloodlines are in the Fushmaline. So the Caddos don't draw the distinction the way that archaeologists have. But during the Mississippian period, when we use this term Caddo, this time when corn comes in, it's developed in Mexico and then brought up, becomes a real central important part of the diet. You can feed a lot of people on it. It's good for supporting very large populations. And if you combine that with corn, beans, and squash, you get the three sisters plants. And so corn, beans, and squash are a really important part of American food history in that the corn and the beans, if you eat them together, they provide almost complete nutrition. This is a very healthy way to live. But then also, they would be grown not in row crops the way that you see now, but people would make a little pile of dirt and grow all three on that same pile. And so the corn would grow tall and provide basically a trellis for the beans.
Well, the bean could climb the corn stalk.
Yeah, and then the squash have large spreading leaves, and they also the plants are a natural deterrent to some pests that would eat the corn and the beans, and they also their leaves shade the surrounding soil and helps preserve water, among other things. And so they're mutually supportive in various ways. And so it's food, it's also just agricultural technology. It's a really fascinating combination. And so when these come in, one of the things we consider a hallmark of the archaeological definition of Caddo is that they're doing basically full-blown agriculture. They have farm fields that people basically live at to cultivate those plants.
You mentioned that the Caddo didn't live in fortified cities, that they were more spread out.
Yeah, it's always interesting when we look at the Caddos versus people in, say, what is now eastern Arkansas, where you have very late people over around, say, like the Parkin Archaeological State Park, which you can go visit today. You have a big village that's surrounded by a wooden stockade. The Caddos never do that. The Caddos basically have sort of a large mound center, ceremonial site, basically. It has a few people who live at it, probably priests and leaders, and maybe a few assistants. But then people live on farmsteads surrounding that area, and they never change that. When DeSoto comes through in 1541, they talk about the transition from these big palisaded villages to now you get to the cattle world, and people just aren't living like that. And it's interesting. We think in eastern Arkansas that's in part driven by warfare, and the Caddos either aren't contending with that, or they're people who are significant enough warriors they don't have to.
So nobody's going to mess with them.
Yeah. Yeah, that's
And that served also to stop the advance of the Spanish. Is that right?
The Spanish actually. So the Spanish, when they're coming through, they have several hundred Spaniards plus a bunch of people that they sort of forcibly enslaved to come with them and be their assistants. And so their mode for moving across much of the southeast was basically to go from one big city to the next, take all the corn, and then go to the next place. But it doesn't work with the Caddos because there's now one place. It's like going from supermarket to supermarket, and then you hit a place where there's only gas stations.
Mm-hmm.
You
can't gather it all up in one place.
Can't keep everybody fed. So they actually get into what is now Northeast Texas and have to turn around, and they work their way back across, get to the Mississippi River, and build boats and sail off to Mexico under a hail of arrows.
Farewell arrows.
Yeah, well, there are 4 accounts from that expedition that make the last stages of it sound like just an absolutely miserable experience if you're one of the soldiers involved in that. Everyone who got back to Mexico City was very happy to have made that.
Be glad to be back there.
Yeah.
Every archaeological story's got to have a good mystery to it. And there's one involved right here at SAU. They had some, according to an article in Magnolia Reporter, back in 2006, there was a theft of some 26 bowls and pots taken from here at the survey office.
Yeah, that was my predecessors.
We're not pointing any fingers.
No, not pointing any fingers, but my predecessor, Dr. Jamie Brandon, I think his first week on the job, he was getting a tour when they discovered this theft. So that was a heck of an introduction to the position for him. There are 26 pots from a place called the Cedar Grove site over in Lafayette County on the Red River. The site is owned by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, so they're federal property, and they should be repatriated to the Caddo Nation.
So that's how the FBI got involved, that it was federal property?
It was federal property.
They've been listed on the database of stolen artwork that the FBI maintains, and so if they're sold or if anybody's looking to buy any of it, it should pop up on that.
It should pop up, and I occasionally get emails from people who see pots that look like one of the Cedar Grove pots, and we have a listing on the Arkansas Archaeological Survey's website. You can download descriptions of all the pots if you need to check yourself. We're always keen to hear any kind of information that would result in them coming back to us, because that's.
And they had intricate designs. You have an intricate design for the survey here, don't you?
Yeah. So very proud of this. The survey's logo that we use for all of our stations statewide is a very intricate design that you can draw the entire thing without lifting a pen, and it's a very old design. It was originally rendered on the base of a bowl that was found here in Columbia County, just outside of Magnolia. So,
that's an honor. That's an honor for LA.
It's the Lower Arkansas thing representing the entirety of the state.
That wasn't one of the bowls that was stolen, was it?
No, no, that one has not been stolen. But these 26 are much more recent.
You think they'll ever turn up? You got any clues?
I'm always hopeful.
Mm-hmm.
And you can. One of the things about this job, you're never entirely sure what's gonna happen on a day-to-day basis. We get calls from people saying, hey, we're going through my grandfather's stuff, and we have,
found these 26 bowls.
Well, that would be nice. I mean, sometimes this, we found these pots. We don't, we think we'd like them to go where they need to go, and sometimes, people open a box and they'll find a skull, and we get that does happen. I mean, people collected things. They collected weird things through the past, and if it's, if a situation where we have a good feel that it's from a Native American site in this area, people can bring that to me. We can repatriate that to the Caddos or other tribes as appropriate. in the case of bones, we also notify the local law enforcement officers just in case it's not that old.
Yeah. These are from 1937 or 67.
And we've actually worked with law enforcement agencies with searches for human remains from more recent things where we specialize in finding things in the woods, and a lot of police agencies don't train on that. So, like I said, we you never know what the day holds.
Well, archaeology is a fascinating topic. I could have gone a lot more. I'm going to ask a lot more questions and sit and listen to you all afternoon, but we are running short on time. You've got a baseball game to get to, but if someone's interested in learning more or getting personally involved in archaeology, they can join the Magnolia chapter of the
Arkansas Archaeological Society. So I work for the survey, and you can.
This is the society.
Yeah. So the society. So the survey website has a bunch of resources if you're generally interested. There's also a bunch of stuff on the Encyclopedia of Arkansas online. But if you want to get involved in doing archaeology, we have the Arkansas Archaeological Society is for people who want to volunteer on, in the lab, in the field, or just learn about things that are going on here in the state. And we have
you all meet monthly?
We meet monthly during the university school year. It's on SAU campus. It's usually the second Wednesday of every month from 5:30 to 6:30. So encourage everyone to come out. Our next meeting will be, I believe, May 8th, and we'll have one of our staff from up at the coordinating office in Fayetteville will be coming down to talk about some research that they've been doing on collections from historic Washington State Park.
That's May the 8th?
May the 8th.
Okay, great. Well, Carl, I appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule, and I think we got out in time for the baseball game.
Yeah,
it's been a pleasure talking to you, and wish you all the best, and hopefully those pots and bowls will turn up one day.
Always hope, man.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Life in LA. Feel free to contact us at steveford@gmail.com if you have a suggestion for a future topic. And as always, tell others about this podcast and share it on your favorite social media. You've been listening to Life in LA, a production of Steve Ford Photography.